So, Joel, I'm going to start with you because the Babylon Bee obviously creates a lot of funny, hilarious content. But on a serious note, why is the work that you guys do important?
I think in today's world, humor has kind of become one of the most effective ways of communicating truth. We're oversaturated with information. It's coming at us from all sides. There's so many distractions. Our attention spans are short. We're not reading long books anymore. And sometimes a pithy little headline that makes a point can be more effective than a lot of those other mediums. So it's become a very powerful tool for that reason. But I think also just I think it serves to give people courage. I think social media is designed to keep us in silos and cut off from each other. Um, you know, Feeling alone in the way we think, like we're the only sane person left on planet Earth, and the Babylon Bee, I think, serves to help people remember that they're not alone in their thinking and their worldview. So, it's for those reasons, I think is why it's continuing to prosper.
Yeah, Kyle, it's interesting because obviously you guys create satire and you're there to make people laugh. And the reason people laugh at satire is there's usually some underlying truth that's driving whatever it is you create. But it is really interesting watching the anger that comes from some people at this satire. You guys have obviously not tweeted since March. There's the whole Twitter, chaos that unfolded. But what most surprises you about the angry responses, or maybe the strange responses that you guys get to some of your content?
Yeah, we get blasted from so many different angles, and maybe the most surprising thing is, where a lot of those kinds of attacks come from. We get criticism from the people you would expect, CNN and the illustrious fact checking team at Snopes. We get we get lots of hate, but there's also hate from progressive Christians. There's hate from people who are on either side of the political extreme. Sorry, my bird just is deciding to disrupt us. I might move her inside. There's attacks from both sides of the political extreme. So what I find is that anytime people are so absorbed in their political system, or they're so sold out to some extra biblical idea or some tradition, they're not able to laugh at themselves. And so you'll get people that love everything we do, and they're like, "Oh man, we love the Babylon Bee." And then you tell the one joke that makes fun of them, and then they're like, "You know what? I usually like satire, but this time you've gone too far. Homeschoolers are off limits. There's nothing funny about homeschoolers. Calvinists are off limits. You can't make fun of Calvinists. Whatever their pet thing is the thing that you can't make fun of." And so I think, which makes it funnier to me, of course. So I think it is humorous to me how people can take a joke and laugh and see the value of humor until it's directed at them, and then all of a sudden it's not funny anymore.
Well, in light of that too, Joel, you guys, everybody sees the final product of what you do and they laugh and they share it. But what goes into that process? Do you guys how do you make sure you don't go over a line? Is there a process of how you sort of vet, what you're going to put out there before you actually hit publish?
Yeah, well, the process is a lot of our stuff is very of the moment. We're commenting on the news of that day. We have a lot of brilliant writers who are constantly pitching headlines, and for every one headline you end up seeing published on the Bee, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of headlines that were rejected. And we do have to be careful about what we publish. Sometimes I'm probably the worst offender in that, right? I actually have an accountability team here in Kyle and the owner Seth. If I think something is skirting that line, I'll usually send it to them and be like, "Guys, can I please publish this?" And they'll be like, "No, Joel, stop." So we have to make sure that if we're going to tell a joke that is really close to the edge or stated in a kind of a really savage way, it has to be worth it. It has to be funny. It has to make a really good point. But if we're just messing around and being edgy for its own sake, we'll usually reject those jokes.
Yeah, and Kyle, it's interesting because when you guys have been punished for things, it's this reminder, or fact checked for things. It's a reminder again that this is satire. And it really felt like for so long, The Onion, Saturday Night Live, all different types of comedy, but specifically satire, there weren't these sorts of fact checks going on. There's one thing to have, quote unquote fake news, and there's another thing to have satire. And you guys have always very clearly been satire. What do you think, Kyle, drives that sort of push to constantly sort of fact check, or in the case of Twitter, even punish you guys?
I believe the left is just starting to wake up to the power of comedy when it's wielded against them. So similar to what I was saying before, where people can laugh until the joke is targeted at them. When I'm talking about people who have absorbed their political, worldview to the point that it's their religion, that is very true of the far left. And so when those people who control big tech and the media and social networks and fact checkers, when all of a sudden they see, oh, we don't own, 99% of the comedy outlets anymore. People are just out there sharing memes, and, Christians are out there making funny TikToks, and Babylon Bee is out there writing satire. All of a sudden it's like they're getting a wake-up call to how powerful their means of communication have been over the years, as they've controlled, so much of the late night shows and comedy and movies and all of that. And so now that those tools are pointing towards them, all of a sudden they treat us quite differently than they treat somebody like The Onion when they fact check us. When they fact check The Onion, it's very lighthearted. It's, those silly readers, they can't tell the difference between an Onion article and reality. When we tell a joke and people get confused, it's, Babylon Bee is sitting in a smoke-filled room in the basement trying to figure out how to trick grandmas on Facebook. So so they treat us very differently than they treat the other guys.
Yeah, and you guys have moved into a number of other arenas. One is book writing. You have a book out, The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress. Joel, tell us a little bit about this modern rendition of the classic.
Yeah, well, this is cool. This is a little something different from what Kyle and I normally do, and this was an idea that has been in Kyle's head for years, and he had started writing it years ago, and approached me, I don't know, a couple years ago, and asked if I wanted to write this with him. It's not really a reboot or a redo of the Pilgrim's Progress. It's a book that is very much an homage or kind of a love letter to the original. The original was extremely influential in both of our lives, and we kind of wanted to give it a bit of a modern spin, a bit of a satirical edge, in the Babylon Bee style, that comments on some of the things happening in today's world, in today's Christian culture, and American politics, and so we had a lot of fun with it, and it felt very natural, considering our backgrounds.
Yeah, and what are you hoping, Kyle, that people take away from this book when they're done reading it?
Yeah, our goal was both to make people laugh and also to make them think a little bit about their Christian life and the way that they follow Jesus. So it's similar to the goal and mission of the Babylon Bee, where we use satire, irony, exaggeration, crazy situations, absurd things that happen, and we kind of just literalize a lot of those things to where you can look at those and you can go, oh yeah, that is I am kind of an idiot in the way that I follow Jesus. It's similar to when you read C.S. Lewis's The Screw Tape Letters, which when I read that book, I'm laughing, and I know it's not written as a funny book, but there's so much great irony where you read about how these demons are tormenting this guy who's trying to decide if he wants to follow God or not, and eventually gets converted in the book. And I'm reading those and I'm like, oh yeah, I do, fall for those tricks every single time. And so it's a way that makes people think. We dedicated the book to, Christians who are kind of just trudging along. And, I think there's the danger, especially in my generation, to want to do all these great things for Christ. Like we want to go out and be on the mission field and convert thousands. And then we grow up and we realize, like, a lot of the time what God calls us to is this just ordinary faithfulness of, dragging my family to church on Sunday morning, and, and being a good father and being a good worker, and being a light in our communities as we share the gospel. So that's kind of what we wanted to. The mantra of the book is the one foot in front of the other type of following Christ.
Yeah, I love what you just said too, because I think a lot of times we're not settled. We want some other job or some other focus, and we're really just called to be a light where we are. And that's tough for a lot of people, because we want the things we want, but when we're in God's will, those things become secondary. And so that's really powerful. Now, you guys, in putting your headlines together every day, you obviously read the real news quite a bit. You stay in touch with what is going on, and you're seeing a lot of the things that are affecting Christians. And so I want to hear from both of you here. Joel, I'll start with you. In the book, you guys deal with a lot of fictional pieces of things that are thrown at characters. In real life, there's a lot going on that is very heavy, that is impacting Christians. When you look out there, Joel, at the landscape that you're looking at every day, what are the biggest things you're concerned about when it comes to Christians, the things that affect Christians in America today?
Yeah, I think the one thing that sticks out to me, and is something that we address in the Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress, is kind of the deconstruction movement. We have an entire generation of young evangelicals who grew up in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s who are kind of disillusioned. Maybe they have been failed or hurt by spiritual leaders in their lives. Maybe they are finding themselves kind of convinced by a lot of the arguments of the world, whether it be from the LGBT community or left-wing politics, and we're seeing a lot of people fall away because of that. Not just deconstructing their faith and rebuilding it, but leaving it altogether. And I think one of the things that's really important for Christians right now is understanding the truth of Scripture as it's written in God's Word, and holding on to that in spite of the cultural noise that is around us. And so I hope this book does serve to encourage people who are maybe in that situation, going through a deconstruction, or maybe a little bit disappointed and disillusioned and questioning God, to stay on the path.
And how about for you, Kyle?
The question is, what kind of challenges are Christians facing in our world? And my answer is basically just TikTok. But
That's it. One word.
Well, I mean, I really think that the way that radicals have managed to kind of harness these platforms and just start to infect the minds of our children is very clever and crafty, just like Satan is, and and it's concerning when you look at the kinds of arguments that are being put out there, and then you look at the number of parents who just say, yeah, sure, my kid can have a smartphone and be alone in his room and be totally brainwashed by crazy people with blue hair screaming on TikTok. I think there's a crazy. We're in a crazy time. When I grew up, we did have the internet eventually. Like, we got the internet when I was in junior high, or right thereabouts is kind of when people started getting. But it was such a dedicated thing. You were like, I'm going to go check my email, and it was an exciting time. Every few days to get to like dial up, like and check your email or whatever.
Got exactly.
And now it's just people are instead of our children's minds being shaped by the family life and playing in the neighborhood and cutting their knees and the Word of God and family devotionals, their minds are getting shaped by people online, and that's something that I think parents need to start to grapple with. That it's not the same world we grew up in, and we need to start being serious about discipling our children.
Yeah, it was also different when, for a long time, the left has really dominated media, Hollywood, universities, education, right? But now with a cell phone in your hand, I didn't even get a cell phone. Like, my parents had phones. I would take their phone with me in high school. I didn't get one until I got to college, and they were like, you have to get a phone. Like, we have to be able to get a hold of you. And it wasn't a smartphone. And you flash forward 15, 20 years, and now all this information is streaming right into kids' hands. You mentioned TikTok. I mean, it's incredible, though, when you kind of go back to what you were saying earlier, the fact that there's a little bit of a shock that the Babylon Bee has broken through the way it has, and it's so popular because really for so long that control that was had by one side, it's getting chipped away at a little bit. There's somebody else in town with a different ideology. And I think that's really interesting. And so my last question for both of you, and Joel, I'll start with you. And this is a heavier question about legacy. I've been asking everybody this. Like at the end of the day, right? Like right now, you're having fun, you're laughing, you're writing books, you're putting daily content out. But in 10 years and 15 years, or even later, what is it that you hope this work that you guys are doing accomplishes?
Wow. Yeah, legacy is an interesting word. I think. I think I'm at peace with the possibility that this is all gone and forgotten in 10 years. I mean, who knows? It might last. It might grow and become this an even greater cultural juggernaut than it is. It might not. After I'm dead and gone, who knows? All I can do is be faithful each day. To kind of what God has given me to do, and use my talents for His glory to the best of my ability. I guess if I could hope, or I could wish, in terms of what I hope the effect that this will have, I hope that it serves to, maybe in our own small way, turn this culture around a little bit. It does seem like we're careening down this slippery slope at 1,000 miles an hour. And I hope that we are, helping to at least slow that down, if not turn it around. But even more important than that, I hope that this serves to bring people to Christ who otherwise, may not have considered Christianity or had written it off. I think we're reaching a new segment of the population that otherwise wouldn't go to church or find Jesus through traditional means. If humor serves to save a couple, then that's what I'm most excited about, I think.
And how about you, Kyle? I
mean, I hope, in terms of legacy, like just that that nobody remembers who I am, really. I want to, I don't know who was it who said, you want to die, preach Christ and die and be forgotten. And like, that is the ultimate goal, right? Is I want to be on a ranch somewhere when I'm 90 and, drinking a non-alcoholic beverage on the porch. And, that, with my parrot, that's kind of my that's kind of my legacy, and I that's the legacy that I hope that I have. Obviously, it's cool to write stuff and know that like Elon Musk is reading our website, and and we'll put out kind of semi-serious like gospel centered articles sometimes, and it's cool to think that there are people out there who are getting that message, and so we hope that goes out for sure.
Well, and I lied because I said that was the last question, but now you brought up Elon Musk, who you guys have been hanging out with. You had at least one hangout with him. That's an interesting relationship there. And it's funny that he is a fan of it. What was that like interacting with him?
Yeah, it's crazy. He was replying to our articles and just kind of laughing at, so sorry, my parents. This is my legacy. But it was crazy that he was just like, yeah, sure, come interview me, and we went and we interviewed him, and it was cool to see a mind like that is so one track, where he's a guy who's like, I am going to put a rocket on the moon, and then he just does it like. Yeah, so he seemed very sincere to me and very one track, where like he would get on a thought process and he wanted to go accomplish it. So you can tell why he's so successful, because he doesn't like, all of us, like we're such scatterbrains. I'm like trying to write an article and I get distracted, and all of a sudden I'm at,
you're on Twitter
right. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, how did I get here? So yeah, you can tell he's a guy who's very determined and focused and knows what he wants and knows to go out and do it. And we got to talk about God a little bit. So that was kind of cool to hear his experience growing up in the church and what his thoughts on God were as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, listen, it was great having you guys on. The book is The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress. And I assume people can go to babylonbee.com to find out more about the book.
Yeah, the book is on Amazon. It's on all the different sites, and we've got links to it in our social medias, mine and Joel's, and there's some links and stuff on the website somewhere, probably.
Awesome. Yeah, wherever books are sold. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your time.